Okay, let's look a little bit at cybersecurity. We are going to take a look at the three things that are fundamental to cybersecurity, or basically a way that you can fit in everything under one head. This would be the CIA triad. The CIA triad has nothing to do with the Central Intelligence Agency. It actually deals with confidentiality, integrity, and availability. These are the three things that hackers try to do. We often just think of the first one, which is confidentiality, right? Somebody hacking in and getting into information that they shouldn't be in, secret information that they shouldn't know, confidentiality. But integrity is also a huge part of this. What if somebody gets in and just modifies the records, just changes the data so you're not aware that the data has been changed? That's bad too. That can be even worse depending on the situation. And then availability. What if they take your website down? Then it didn't matter that it was confidential or that the integrity of it was good. You can't actually get to it. So when we look at cybersecurity, you will find that everything will fit within this triad, that the attacks, that the defenses, that everything will fit in confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So let's get started and let's take a look at threats to confidentiality. So keeping things secret, what are the threats that are out there? Well, one of them is snooping, and that's really just hanging around and catching things like an employee may look at emails on a computer that's not theirs after somebody's left it logged in and unattended. And let's see what's on that screen. And I'll look around and see what's going on. Snooping. So that is a threat. Wiretapping. Now, you would think everybody knows what wiretapping is because they've seen it in old movies, but we don't often use a landline anymore. So what do they mean by wiretapping? Well, they mean to use programs that can eavesdrop on things. If I could figure out a way to eavesdrop on your cell phone, or much easier, use a packet sniffer to capture data transmitted over a network. What really helps avoid having this happen is using data encryption. In other words, scrambling the data so that if they get the data, they don't know what to do with it. Right? That's keeping it confidential. Social engineering is a huge one. Social engineering basically is how a person manipulates another person to get what they want. And so much of what happens online today is about social engineering. Oh, I am a McBride and you don't know me, but I got $4 billion and I need to give it away. Just give me your name and let's start a conversation because I'd hate for this just to go to the bank. Right? Social engineering, you're trying to trick me into eventually giving away my bank account, and then they drain my bank account. That has happened all the time. So attacks may be done in person, over the phone, through a browser window, through email messages. It's basically trying to trick people. That's what you're trying to do. Technological security measures are not only partially effective against these types of attacks. Most important things you can do is train users. So you can put things in place to try to figure out what emails are actually being attacked, or you can try to say, we'll add this to the browser so that if this pops up, that it'll say, hey, this is an attack. But you never can do enough to make sure that it's not happening. And so you need to train the users. People are trusting. They just don't see how their data could be used maliciously most of the time. Obviously, they understand, hey, if I have your user ID to your Chase account, I'm getting in and I'm stealing your money. People get that, but they don't realize that somebody may be socially hacking them, socially engineering them out on Facebook to try to get their user ID and password for their Facebook account, and then hoping that that'll be able to get them into their checking account as well. All right, so reconnaissance, that's a type of social engineering exploit that passively gathers information about the potential victim. That includes, looking over their shoulders, watching keystrokes while they type, listening to conversations that they're having, dumpster diving. I'm sure you guys all do that. Dive in the dumpster, find important documents that they didn't shred to get information. Pretexting is an engineering attack that attempts to trip the victim into revealing sensitive information, like I said before, somebody pretending to be an authority. Well, I really need to know this information to help you out. And then they give them sensitive information. Familiarity to leverage or supposed friendship to convince the victim to allow access. So, I know this about you, so you better give me access. You better let me know this, right? Email attacks, all sorts of things, phishing emails, where they're trying to get information from you, such as bank or email, commerce websites, and those pretend, right? They pretend, oh, my bank account's been hacked. Click. Oh, look, this is the actual bank account, even though it says I'm here to rip you off.com. All right, let me just type that in. Here's my user ID. Here's my password. Oh, that didn't let me into my bank. I must have been hacked. Yeah, you just got hacked. Right, that's kind of phishing emails, spear phishing. That is actually, they know who you are. They're targeting you, so they try to get as much information out of the victim as possible. And of course, scams and hoaxes, where they're just like, ha ha ha, this is a hoax, but you follow along with it. And that's very common. Oh, Microsoft released this thing that says you better do this because you're already hacked. It's a total hoax, but people do it anyway. That tricks you into deleting key system files, or downloading malware. That's a huge one with a scam or a hoax. Oh, you've got viruses. You need to download this. I just helped a person out probably a couple of weeks ago, and he came in. He was an older gentleman, and so I asked him questions. So what is this showing on your screen? And I was able to get enough information. I wish he'd just taken a picture. And then I realized, oh, this is a hoax, right? They're trying to get him to download malware to compromise his system. Then he'll really have a virus, and then they'll charge him for taking it off. And so I said, just go home and shut down your computer. Just press the button on it. Don't do anything on the operating system. Press the button. And if it doesn't shut down, turn it all off. And then when you start it up, let me know if this message comes back. Because I knew that he hit some website and that's just a pop-up. So he never came back, right? Because that was a hoax. That was a total hoax. And then browser attacks, a type of social engineering. The attacker tries to convince the victim of revealing sensitive information or installing malware on their computer and say it's a legitimate attack. Farming redirects the web traffic intended to legitimate sites to malicious sites, which I described before, or rogue antivirus attacks, which I just described, which is a pop-up window. There's so many different ways that a person can fall victim. And the best thing to be able to do for the person is just to help them understand that they are going to be attacked and they need to sit within certain parameters and not trust anything else, which is, it's hard for people to do that. All right, so let's look at integrity. So in addition to protecting confidential data, we need to make sure the data is not corrupted. The malware hasn't done something, that it hasn't changed the data. We need to make sure that the data, if it's being transmitted, arrives intact, unaltered. So if we're sending something, we need to make sure nobody's grabbed it, changed the message, and then sent it on. And so you end up with a one-path attack, also known as a man-in-the-middle attack. And the best way to describe this is the way, if you saw this in reality, you know that the spy is going to show up in the park and you're not the legitimate person that the spy is going to talk to. So you show up in the park early and contact them, pretending to be the legitimate person. Then you turn around and feed some lie to the person that the spy was supposed to talk to. You're the man in the middle, right? That's what that is. And you can do the same thing where a hacker impersonates a client to the server, or the hacker impersonates, they're basically monitoring the traffic that's coming between these 2 points. A replay attack is a hacker sniffs the packets between the client and server in hopes of obtaining the authentication information. A replay attack is used because you are encrypting your password being sent to the server. And so they can't see your password. But what if I just capture the password? And then that way I can actually, from my machine, log in with your user ID. And when they say, oh, we need a password. I just send that encrypted data. I don't know what your password is. I just replay that data and it lets me in. Impersonation, trying to, pretend that you're somebody that you're not supposed to be. For an example, in a TCP session, hijacking, the attacker gains access to a host on the network and logically disconnect the client. The attacker then pretends to be the client. Right? So he hacks, this is part of hacking the session so that you are actually in the session. You impersonate the other person. And then unauthorized changes, one-path attacks, replay attacks, session hijacking are often used to gain unauthorized access to the system. With the system access, the hackers can steal even more confidential information. They can also alter it or corrupt it, which may be their mode. Maybe they don't care about what you're doing. Maybe they already know what you're doing and they just want to change figures, change facts, so that whatever you're doing gets messed up or just gets destroyed. And so that's some integrity facts. And now we'll take a look at our availability of this triad. So your website needs to stay up, your servers need to stay up, people need to be able to gain access to that. Lots of money is lost every year with this type of attack. The first one actually doesn't really work anymore, but conceptually you need to know what it is, and that's a denial of service. And what happens is the attacker tries to overload the system basically by requesting services. And they request services so much that nobody else can request services, and the legitimate people get denied service. So really clearly what this is talking about is I send a bunch of requests to basically the web server, and then that web server has so many requests from me, it can't answer yours and you get denied. And therefore I've made you lose money. Now that doesn't work anymore, because if one place out there on the internet is actually requesting that, they just stop it. They just ignore you. And so now we have different variations of it. And this is one, a distributed denial of service. So if you actually take the concept of malware and you infect somebody's system with your malware, but the malware doesn't really do anything but sit there until you actually send it some code that says attack this system, or basically request a bunch of web pages. Now you can do that so that the web browser is not up on the screen requesting pages, it's happening behind the scenes. Well, if one person's doing that, right, as I said, the website will go, well, it's one person accessing this all the time, let's cut them off, and they ignore you, is what happens. Denial of services only really works if you've got thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people all requesting web pages at a very high rate in this particular instance. So what that means is that I infected you with malware. The malware sits there until I send it, and actually in here, I would be the zombie master, and I send that stuff to the machines and say, request this. And now the website is just overloaded with all these page requests coming from 100,000 different people. What does it do? And what that means is, as other people that are legitimate will be denied services. They won't be able to get to that website. When you think of any huge business, they will lose millions off of seconds. And US is targeted for that all the time. That's why they're always complaining about China, because they're like, China, you're behind this. And they're like, oh, no, we're not behind it. I mean, there might be some attackers in China doing that, but we didn't sponsor them, which is like, well, who's paying them then, right? Anyway, a power outage actually caused the electricity to go down so that the systems are not working. A hardware failure. If you look up Stuxnet, that's really Stuxnet, it really sucked. Actually, it didn't affect us at all, but they caused a hardware failure with that. So you create something in the system that causes it to just run, and then the CPU overheats and shuts down, and that's a hardware failure, or the hard disk eventually fails or whatever. And then, of course, data destruction. System administrators are often responsible for the disposal and destruction of sensitive data on old hard drives. So it's important to do that. However, data destruction can also occur from malicious and accidental reasons, natural disasters, acts of terrorism, accidental coffee spills, all those things can cause data destruction. And so again, it's like, oh, we're not talking about hackers. We're talking about James spilling his 44 ounce actually on his notebook. And maybe it's now damaged the hard drive. And then of course, service outages, meaning that you cannot get to these places because the internet is down, and causing outages by taking the power out for switches or routers, or causing too much traffic in a certain area. And so if the employees can't get to that, then they're kind of stuck. They're stuck with not being able to do the job. And then lastly, at least in this video, we're going to take a look at digital privacy facts. So much we could go through in these areas, and I don't want to give you basically two videos that repeat themselves, theirs and mine. So let's talk about digital privacy. What does that mean? Do we have any left? Most people expect to have some measure of privacy in their daily lives. Most countries have laws that protect that privacy. However, if the internet is involved, privacy is never a certainty. And that's really what we've come to. Social media is scoured and scoured and scoured. So even if you delete something out on Facebook, oh, this is funny. Lots of people believe that Snapchat actually deletes things. Well, Snapchat used to many, many years ago, but then they were bought out and they said, hey, we'll delete them for you and for everybody else, but we actually keep a recording of that. So whatever Snapchat you send is stored someplace. Whatever Instagram thing you've sent, even if you deleted it, is stored someplace. Facebook, it's stored someplace. And that's really all used by our government and also by targeting for making money off of you. In a very real way, capitalism has hit its worst peak ever. And there's nothing wrong with capitalism, but in this sense there is, where basically they are harvesting so much data off of you. They want to tweak how you're spending your money. They want to know where you're spending your money. They want to predict where you're spending your money. And that's a huge part of why all this is happening. Of course, the other is we're starting to see the manipulation of that data that's on the other side that we don't see, that they're keeping on us, and they're getting these profiles of who we are, and they can predict our actions based on that. And it's kind of a scary situation to be in. We don't have to be in that situation. It's just that there's so much money, these corporations like Facebook and Google. And no, I'm not going to throw Microsoft and Apple into that because they've been very straightforward on saying that's your privacy and we shouldn't be involved in that. But the other two, that's the way they make their money. And so they make so much money off of that, it's very easy for them to make sure that privacy policies don't get in the way of their making money. Let's put it that way. As a matter of fact, this is just a little information for you. Google and Facebook were opposed to any kind of privacy policies, and they made sure they lobbied against them at a national level and have done for years and years. And then all of a sudden, California, heaven forbid they be the example, huh? But they started to actually go through and say what you could and couldn't use for cookies and other privacy things. That's why you start to see this little message at the bottom saying our cookies are going to do this, that, and the other. And now they're fighting for a national security privacy law so they can get rid of California's. So they're really not looking for privacy. They're looking for, we want to get your data as much as possible because that's how we're making our money. And so even in secure transactions, right, that may be secure, but the transactions themselves, lots of people will use, oh geez, what are those? The different ones. And it's free to send somebody money. It's free. You can send somebody money, it's absolutely free. But they're actually recording what that transaction is and what you used it for. And then, oh, my picture up here is freaking out. So let me just get rid of that. There we go. And then, of course, internet usage and monitoring. This comes down to, I mean, everybody's doing that. Your organization might do that on you. if you're going out through Chrome, it's monitoring everything that you're doing with that. Most web browsers are going to do that unless they're telling you that, hey, use us, because we're not doing that. So I'll kind of laugh because people go, oh, I'm going to get a VPN, and then people won't be able to track me on the internet. And it's like, well, you're using it in Chrome. So Chrome knows what you're doing. So anything in that VPN is not private because there's layers. And when you get done with networking, and if you're in the security stuff, you'll understand there's layers to this, and that you have to secure it at each of those layers in order to not have somebody know what's happening in your life. And then, of course, data protection, making sure people will wipe what they need to wipe off of that. I can't believe how many computers are actually sold at yard sales, and they're like, well, I formatted it. I can bring that back in 4 seconds, and so can anybody else. In businesses, they can actually remote wipe. In other words, they can say, oh, you lost your phone? Let me remote wipe that. Apple was one of the first to do that, basically saying, hey, if you tied into your iCloud account and you lost it, you can get on a computer and say, wipe my phone, and it's wiped and totally locked, so it becomes useless. And now all phones should offer that. You may not have it set up, but you should have that set up so that you can locate where it is, you can lock it, you can remote wipe it, and these are all things that big businesses will do to make sure that data that is theirs on your phone will not be lost and not be gained by somebody else. And then what about surveillance at work? Physical monitoring, actually cameras watching you work. How about that? That's happening in a lot of places. Security assurance is policies that allow companies to monitor the types of data employees send to ensure that they're not divulging confidential information. That's going to happen. It's not going to happen to me because I'm not working any place where that's really, really significant. But if you're working in a place that's like Samsung making the latest phone, they're going to monitor your email to make sure you're not sending out something that you shouldn't. And then monitoring data to gain an understanding of the employee's productivity. Are they working? Are they doing what they want to do? And I see this kind of monitoring, all this stuff and digital privacy becoming more and more a part of our lives, because I think that those that are growing up with it are not thinking about what's going to happen because of it. If you're not thinking about what could be happening because of it, then you need to understand that in our past history, there has been times and opportunities. Let me stop the share here. There has been times when people have been persecuted because of whatever their beliefs were. The hugest, well, there's been really recent examples, but the hugest example would be the Red Scare. So you can look that up. I was not alive at the time, but basically what happened is they were so afraid of communism and what was happening with communism, they tracked down anybody that had what they felt was a communist tie, and then they just ruined their work. They made it so they couldn't get hired anywhere. If you're in the 100 class, then you get to see Eric Mockley and that stuff, Eckert and Mockley, sorry, and that stuff, and how they just lost their business because he went to a meeting where somebody that might have been a socialist was at, and they just destroyed them. That kind of thing happens when people get really afraid of things. And we've had situations in our society now where, oh, if you have this belief, then you're kind of blackballed and socially engineered out, right? Facebook is going to kick you out of that. These are just little tiny things that lead us to, hey, what's going to be the big thing, right? What's going to happen in the big way? I'm back. Anyway, so privacy is a big concern. And as you move through the privacy section, I've got a ton of information on privacy I try to throw in different classes. But I will include a link to information that I picked up along the way teaching classes about privacy. You might want to check that out. It's not part of your score or anything.